members out of our 17, so we're going to go ahead and proceed. The first item on our agenda is going to be approving minutes from our last meeting. If I can get a motion, please.
A motion to approve, David Schultz.
Thank you, David. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second it. Peter Martiniaco.
Thank you, Peter. So with a motion and a second to approve the minutes, do we have any discussions before we move on to a vote? Okay, seeing no discussion, let's proceed with the roll call vote.
Chair Pa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Scraba,
Yes.
Kelly Bruns.
Yes.
Representative Falconer, Dale Gentry, Senator Green,
Yes.
Angela Gupta, Bradley Harrington, Greg Fale, Peter Martiniaco,
Yes.
Rebecca Montgomery, Kristen Poppleton,
Yes.
Ingrid Schneider, David Schultz,
Yes.
Luke Skinner, Matt Wappler,
Yes.
Gary Wyatt.
Yes.
All right, looks like we've got 11 ayes, 0 nays, and 0 abstains, so the minutes are approved.
Oh, hi, sorry. This is Ingrid Schneider. So sorry to interrupt. I couldn't get unmuted. I missed it, but I don't think my name is in the minutes. And I was at the meeting.
Thank
I
you.
just
Ingrid,
looked at that. Yeah.
Thank you for letting us know. Okay, we've added you. Thank you, Ingrid. So we're going to go ahead and move to, I'm just going to talk about the purpose of the task force. And maybe we won't be doing this for every single meeting, but for the first couple of ones, we're just going to review them at the beginning. And it's mainly not so much for us, but for people who are watching our meetings or joining us as public members. So our Sustainable Foraging Task Force was established in 2025 legislation to gather and review data on foraging, examine existing regulations, and work collaboratively to develop recommendations for the legislature that ensures state lands provide both public access and foraging opportunities while protecting our conservation needs. And with that, we're going to start the work of our task force. We'll start with the agenda for today.
Nick, did you have an updated presentation or should I share the previous version?
I added a couple things to the.
But it's the same book. Okay.
On the Teams.
Okay. Then let me share and if you wanted to go ahead and talk through all.
Yeah. Oh, let me grab it. I have it in front of me. Oh, I don't think I have a copy of the slide. Sorry. Or maybe not yet.
The agenda then should be.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll just go through the agenda versus
Yeah.
the slide. Okay. So today on the agenda, we do have our updates from Stephanie, and then we'll go through the draft charter as administrative topics, and then we'll go to the presentation about our Minnesota statutes and regulations and rules currently, and then we'll discuss also the scope of our task force and the work that we want to do. Beyond that, we'll go ahead and go into other states' statutes, regulations, and rules and explore those. Nick will also present those to us. And then after that, we'll go through upcoming topics that we may want for our next coming meetings. Let's see here. That is it. That's what's on our agenda today. Any questions about what's on our agenda today? Okay, great. All right. What we're going to do the first couple of times is we're going to do name introductions again. I believe today we have a new member, correct, Nick? A new member that's joined us?
Yes.
Yes.
Who is it? Rebecca. Okay. We do have a new member that have joined our task force group, Rebecca Montgomery. from the Board of Regents, is there?
Yeah, she was a Board of Regents appointee.
Okay, Board of Regents appointee. So welcome, Rebecca. We're going to go around and just do introductions, our name and organization that we represent. Did you say Rebecca's here or not?
She's not.
Oh, she's not. Okay.
She only probably found out about the meeting. about
Okay.
a month ago, so.
Okay, because we were going to do this introduction for her, so she gets to know us and we get to know her. But we'll go ahead and do it anyhow. So Senator Pa represents Senate District 38 and the Senate DFL liaison to this group.
Stephanie Klein, Management Analysis and Development Facilitator.
State Senator Steve Green, District 2. Representative Roger Strauss, District 3A.
Peter Martinaco, Minnesota Mycological Society.
Dale Gentry, I'm the Director of Conservation for Audubon Upper Mississippi River.
Kristen Poppleton, Assistant Director with Minnesota Trout Unlimited.
Hi, David Schultz, representing the Minnesota Foraging Alliance.
Aneen Bradley Harrington, I'm the Director of Tribal Relations for Minnesota Department of Natural Resources.
Kelly Bruns, Minnesota DNR.
Matt Wappler, Minnesota DNR Division of Forestry.
I'm Greg Qualley with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
And Nick Nero, LCC Research Analyst.
And I think we have some members online, so we'll go online.
Ingrid, did you want to start?
Sure. Good morning. Ingrid Schneider, University of Minnesota, Department of Forest Resources.
Let's go Greg and then Jennifer. I'm sorry, Gary.
Oh, yeah, Gary Wyatt, with the University of Minnesota Extension, based on Mankato Regional Office for our forestry team. Actually, Angie and I are actually teaching right now, so she's not going to be with us, but I wanted to take it in. We're at Brainerd teaching our pesticide class with the MDA.
Good morning, everybody. Jennifer Hawkins, management consultant with the Management Analysis and Development team. I'm Stephanie's team member.
And I see Rebecca was able to join us. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Great, thanks. Hi, I'm Rebecca Montgomery. I am a faculty member in the Forest Resources Department at the University of Minnesota as well with Ingrid. Happy to be here.
Welcome, Rebecca. We were just saying that you were a new member that joined our group, so welcome to this group. And I believe, Bradley, I think you're also, this is your first meeting as well, right? Okay, I thought so. I don't remember seeing you the last time. Welcome to the task force. Thank you. Well, we'll hand it over to Stephanie.
Sorry, I needed a sip of water there. So a number of updates on administrative topics. Quick update on additional appointments. We obviously have 2 new members joining us today and a couple more appointees that Nick and Senator Pa are still working on lining up for us. And then we will be a complete task force. So that is underway. We're just finalizing the schedule for the remaining meetings. It's looking like most of them will be Tuesdays at this time, and although there are a couple where we're deviating from that schedule, either for holidays or largely because we want to make sure that no member is being forced to miss 2 meetings in a row. So looking at everybody's availability, at least for those who completed the availability poll, and that schedule should be coming out within a day or so. Another item is the member interviews. You may remember from last time, or if you're new, you'll just be hearing about it now. My team, Management Analysis and Development, is going to be conducting interviews with each of you, with your permission. And we're going to be asking questions about kind of your goals for the work group, any concerns that you might have about accomplishing those goals, and also asking you to take a look at a draft charter for the work group, which includes kind of, mission and approach to the work and decision-making and so on. We will compile all of that, bring it back to you so that you have kind of a shared view of what you're collectively hoping to achieve and how you hope to achieve it. And we'll then ask you to approve both operating agreements and the charter itself. So more on that. When you get your interview scheduled, then we'll be sending the interview guide and also a copy of the charter. If for any reason you're not able to do an interview, please let me know and I will make sure that you get a copy of the charter, even if you're not getting one alongside an interview confirmation. Everybody here and online should have received an email from me or a member of my team, Jennifer Hawkins, who you just met via Zoom, or Stephanie Heim. If you haven't received an email from one of us, check your spam folder. And if you still haven't, then please let me know and we'll figure out what's wrong and why we haven't been able to reach you yet. Last up for this, or almost last up for this slide, the field trip location has been decided. It's going to be for Fort Snelling State Park, kindly hosted by folks from DNR who will allow you to live and breathe a little real life foraging. I know not everybody on the task force here has had much experience with that. Now that we have the meeting schedule figured out, we'll work on finding a day and time for the field trip. We're no longer limited to a September 15th deadline. Bob Meyer had originally suggested before September 15th to avoid any crossing paths with hunters, which with a large group in the forest is a little hard to coordinate, but by choosing Fort Snelling State Park, that's no longer a concern. So that gives us a little more time to play with. So stay tuned for that. And then I already mentioned the draft charter. And I'll pause for questions as soon as I get through this other bit of administrative topics. So again, last time we had talked about the potential approach for public input, and I'll be asking for your thoughts on this and everything else we've covered. So we're going to begin the call for in-meeting input for members of the public who want to attend a meeting and share their thoughts at that time. We'll begin that next meeting. We're going to ask people to contact Nick in advance whenever possible so that we can plan around that. Once we have identified topics for each meeting, then, and have those announced, we'll ask members of the public to join meetings where they have testimony relevant to that topic. Again, kind of where possible. We want people to feel free to speak up when they want to and when they can. There will be time limits, of course. We need to make sure that you all have time to do the work of the task force. But what works well is, with a 2-minute time limit to kind of share the highlights and speak from the heart and have the details in written form that can be sent ideally beforehand so members can review the information, but if not afterward or at the same time is fine. Given that we're going to be limiting in meeting time for members of the public, we're also going to be doing separate listening sessions. And again, now that we've got the task force meetings themselves almost confirmed, we will look at scheduling a number of those. We may be able to offer longer time limits because, we're not going to be trying to squeeze it into 10 or 15 minutes of a larger task force meeting. Mostly will be via Zoom. 1 or 2 will be in person here at the Capitol. We'll vary times of day so that people with different work and life schedules can have multiple opportunities. Some meetings we will specifically, call for input related to individual regions. Although, again, with any listening, anyone is welcome, but to give folks some focus, we'll do that. And that's our way of balancing input during meetings with input overall and with your time to do your work here in task force meetings themselves. Does anyone have any questions or concerns or additional ideas regarding our opportunities for members of the public to provide input? And of course, feel free to send an email to Nick or me or Senator Pa if you have ideas at any point. Peter, I think, were you the one who suggested doing region specific or location specific listening sessions? Was that your idea last time? Yeah, so I will be following up with you to ask for your thoughts on kind of what should constitute a region in this context. And then as we start to build the schedule, and of course, everybody else is welcome as well, but I figure I'll start with Peter since you have some thoughts on that. Yeah. Well, and certainly from a foraging perspective, I figure it's going to be very different than from many other perspectives. So we'll be looking at that. And then also, if anyone has thoughts or questions about any of the other things that I've just mentioned, if you have questions about the charter, et cetera. And then up next is going to be, doing that identification of topics for each meeting. The topics for today are what was asked for last time, which was an overview of Minnesota laws, rules, and regulations and other states, and Nick will be presenting on that in a little bit. So for each meeting will have one or two topics, at least for the first handful of meetings, before you start to get deeper into kind of what the recommendations might be that you'll be crafting. Then, of course, scheduling the field trip and scheduling the listening session. That is the full list of administrative topics. There will be fewer as we continue and get further into the work of the task force. Any questions on any of that before I hand over to Susan to introduce the presentations? All right.
Anyone online? Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. So we're going to go ahead and move into the Minnesota statutes, regulations, and have Nick present that. But I do just want to note that with these upcoming presentations, it is a part of our the bill of putting together this task force that we gather and review data and information that's in the enabling legislation. So this is part of that process of gather and review. So we'll go ahead and have Nick present on the information.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. This was a little long to add to a single PowerPoint slide. So if you, in your packet, you'll see a memo listing all of them. And for members online, if you go to the Foraging website, or the website for this task force, you will see it listed as one of the handouts there. I'm not sure what it's titled, but it is there. So for just starting off with the Minnesota statutes and regulations, first off, we have the noxious weed law, which members requested information about. The noxious weed law is pretty significant and pretty long, so I just did a couple excerpts here, including the definition of noxious weed and the definition of eradicate. But the law goes into the extensive rules around eradicating and controlling noxious weeds, both on state land and also on private land, and working with the Department of Agriculture to do those tasks. The second topic was wild rice harvesting. That's also a pretty long set of laws, so I put the statute there. If members want to look at it later, it's also linked online, and that includes the broad powers of the commissioner to regulate, creates the harvesting season, which I know I've spoken to Representative Scraba about, which is August 15th to September 30th. That's in statute. And then the statute also specifically protects Native Minnesotans' harvesting rights. And then nestled within that is the wild ginseng law, which also gives power to the commissioner to regulate that. And I also just want to point out on this memo that I put the years of the most recent revisions to each of these laws. So you can see some of them are a little newer, some of them are a little older. And then we're jumping down into regulations. So for wild ginseng, the statute is pretty short itself, but the regulation creates broader or more specific rules on that. And lastly, I'll go to the foraging regulation. And that's pretty long, but I tried to excerpt what I think are the relevant portions for this task force, which creates the ability for a member of the public, specifically on the line, accept edible fruit, mushrooms, legally taken wild animals and vegetation. And then it continues to go on about within state parks about when you can, what you can specifically take. Again, the except that edible fruit and mushrooms may be harvested for personal, non-commercial use. And then lastly, I thought it was worth linking and noting the 1854 treaty and how Minnesota is also binded by that, which provides Native Minnesotans the right to hunt and fish therein. And it's my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, that that has also been interpreted to cover foraging as well. So within parts of northern Minnesota, there are certain native rights to foraging that are beyond the scope of the state legislature. And the rest of the memo is about national, which I'll get into in a second. But I'm happy to answer any questions or leave it open for member discussion. If there's anything that members also thought that I didn't cover, I don't know what I don't know. So please feel free to either say now or email me later other things that you thought I should have covered and you'd like to share with members.
Madam Chair, Matt Wappler. One addition, Nick, is statute chapter 88 has some definitions and provisions related to special forest products. While those may not always be considered a foraging item, there is some language there that allows DNR to issue permits for the collection and use of special forest products. And that's the same permit that we use when issuing a special permit for collection of large amounts of other edible items.
Is that for personal and commercial or just commercial?
Both,
Okay, both.
yes.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
Gary Wyatt, I was wondering, thank you, Matt, for mentioning that. Wondering if decoratives from the woods or from native landscapes is considered in this foraging task force. I'm thinking of birch bark and so forth, decoratives like willows and pine cones, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know. I think it's something for us to kind of think about.
Chair, Matt, does the DNR issue, I'm assuming the permits you were first speaking about are like bows. People are gonna cut for this time of the year, they're in the woods. They have to get that special use permit to have a trailer full coming out of the woods instead of a couple for them. Does that include the birch poles and the birch bark?
Madam Chair, yes, that would include some of those products as well. Also, within the state forest rules, there is an allowance for the collection of plants, not just plant parts, but actual collection of plants, and that would be allowed with a special product permit. So we use that permit for multiple products, not just special decorative materials.
Madam Chair, to finish.
Yes, Roger.
So let's say I've got my firewood permit and I'm cutting birch. I got a sale, there's birch in there, not commercial, just me to go get firewood for my house. And as I'm cutting the birch, I'm like, this is big birch. Because people fill it with wax and make birch candles, whatever. Do I need another permit for that, or can I use that harvesting? It's already harvested, i.e.
The policy answer would be you need a second permit because it's being considered a different product. And if the intent is to sell it, then again, it's a different product. There may be some sales tax implications there.
Okay.
And that's why we would require a secondary permit.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to reflect a little bit on what Matt said. When I was with the Division of Forestry, I worked a large amount with the permitting process. And there's everything from veneer quality basswood that people want to come in and get to carve decoys out of, to spruce tips to make commercial products out of. So there's just a whole variety of things, and I think what Matt's pointing out is there's a large area of foraging and gathering that's covered by the permit process that the DNR currently has on state forest lands that does not really exist, to my knowledge, on other types of state lands. I don't know that they'd have adopted that process, but maybe we could get that information. I think it'd be beneficial, and maybe some examples of some of the gathering permits that have been issued, so we can take a look at them. Thanks.
Yeah, that sounds good. Steve.
Thank you, Susan. Sounds strange. I've been listening to this, and we're overregulated now. I mean, we just are. And now you can't go in to the woods and pick a mushroom without getting a permit. I find that very troubling in a free country. And so I'm listening to this and I'm wondering, where this idea came from in the first place and what is the real goal? I know we've got the proposed statement there, but is the goal of this committee to restrict more so people have to ask permission to go into the woods and pick blueberries or mushrooms? Is that what our goal is here?
Thank you, Steve.
It was your bill, so I'm asking you.
Yes. So I'll give a little bit of back history on the bill. The bill actually came up from stakeholders in the community, brought to my attention because I had done some work in some community listening session on foraging with concerns about access to foraging. And so that was how it landed at my desk. We had talked about making sure that the public has access to forage on state lands, and not restricting those access, or not leaving it to just the DNR department to make rules on it, but really to have a more legislative process to that. And so it was thought that maybe it'd be best to do a task force that brings together all of you with different perspectives to the table, and maybe really have a robust discussion about foraging in the state of Minnesota. So not leaving it to the legislature to just decide on any laws or policy, or just to the DNR department to do rulemaking, but maybe this is a great time for all of us to get together and really look at foraging and make recommendations to the legislature, whether that is less rules, more rules, or policies that surround it, but that those recommendations would come from this group. And then the legislature can decide what kind of laws or policies it's going to put together. I think the concern from the groups that brought this to me was that they were concerned that the DNR would be doing rulemaking that would restrict foraging without enough of public input and others from all the stakeholders' input. I'm not saying that that is true. I'm not stating that that is true. I'm just saying that that was the concern that was brought to me. And that's why we have this task force to kind of look at foraging. I think in the history of Minnesota, we haven't had really anything robust regarding foraging other than the wild rice and the ginseng. So this is that opportunity for us to do it in a lens from one, access, making sure that people have access, that it's also the cost of financial burden is not a barrier to foraging, but also what are those conservation needs too? What do we have to be mindful of so that foraging is sustainable for the future? I hope that answered your question.
Somewhat, but the issue is, the last meeting here as I listened to the folks talk here, it was like they were talking themselves into more regulations, and not only for the state, but actually expanding it to county and federal lands. And so I just want to get a clear picture of what we're going into, and to make it clear that I don't think we need any more regulations, and I don't think we need to tell people that they have to go get a permit if they want to go onto state land and pick whatever they want to pick. It's just, enough's enough. We've already heard from Matt on what they regulate already. So that's where we're coming from. So thank you for the answer.
Thank you, Steve. David.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the way I just think about this committee, I want to supplement some of what you said here. I think the committee comes down to two words.
Flip on your microphone.
Oh, it is on.
Oh.
It is on. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, just wasn't close enough. I think this committee comes down to two words, values and evidence. And I think it's a way of describing it here. That on the one hand, we have, and I'm not taking any position right now. I'm still waiting to hear a lot of, information here. But on the one hand, we have a lots of clash of values with lots of different constituencies who believe different things. Do we have more? Do we have less regulation? Who should do it? Where should do it? How do we address issues in terms of, like you said, access, affordability, and so forth like that? So a lot of it is about values, but at the same time, it's about evidence. And how I sort of envision what we're doing here as I read the legislation also is that we're coming up with recommendations through this task force that go on to the legislature that give them some guidance for how to reconcile all those competing values and sift through all that evidence. So that's sort of how I'm viewing what we're doing here. And I don't know if anybody else sees it differently, but that's sort of how my perspective is on it.
Thank you, David. Anyone else is open? Peter, and then Kristen.
Oh, and in, my view on this is that, the current regulations and structures are restrict access and create barriers to people taking advantage of foraging. And in talking to many people in the foraging community, frankly, they ignore them and with little consequence. And not to suggest that there needs to be consequences for some of those things, but I think there needs to be clarification and understanding. And to go back to the question that was originally asked is, how does this affect things like decorative products? It is a question, but I think my personal view is that this task force should focus on foraging for personal use foodstuffs, because that's the primary issue that I see the foraging community concerned about in terms of foraging for things that are currently generally prohibited without permits, and whether that can be reconciled with the necessary conservation protections. And so it's not more regulation. In many ways, it's less regulation.
Thank you, Peter. Kristen. And then Dave.
Madam Chair, Greg Qualley. I don't know how to
Greg, can I
frame.
ask you just to wait for a minute? I'm going to have Kristen and then why don't we come to you and then Dale?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kristen Poppleton. Kind of bringing this back full circle to the review of the regulations and evidence. I like the way you frame that. My interest is just that the foraging, the regulations that exist, what was the precursor to them? And in the first place, was it because there was a conservation need, there was an access, or just, I'm interested in that if we are talking about limiting or adding access to foraging. So historical context for the regulations that exist.
Yeah, thank you. Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It's interesting to hear the topic brought up of other forms of extraction. Just for context, I'm also on the Minnesota Forest Resources Council, where we've heard some of these concerns about people cutting spruce tops and whatnot. And I would say that those are very different types of collection. It's an extraction of a plant, potentially removing the entire plant that might not regenerate. And foraging in general, to me, feels different in practicality, and that it's not that plant is going to be affected, but it's not going to be removed. So, and it just feels like an entirely different, to me, concern. So my suggestion, along with Peter's, that we focused on collection of food, edible products for personal consumption, and leave the spruce tops and birch bark and whatnot to a different task force.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg.
Well, I was going to elaborate on that a little bit. I think that's one thing that really needs to be determined here is what should be regulated and what should not be regulated. And we need to know the basics on what's out there as far as the law and the statute is concerned. And actually, another thing that may be of consideration here, I don't know how many of you waterfall hunt, but there's a program, nationwide program. It's called HIP. It's a registration. Lets the Agency of Fish and Wildlife Service know how many people actually hunted waterfowl. I think that's something that could be very useful here in a survey type of thing. If you are buying a hunting license, do you forage? Blah, blah, blah. It wouldn't be hard to add that into the questions that they ask. And I'd give you a lot more data. I'd give all of us a lot more data on what actually is going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else? Bradley.
Yeah, so thinking about the reference to the 1854 treaty authority, there's also the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission that oversees a portion of Minnesota, the 1837 ceded territory from about Brainerd down to St. Cloudish and straight across over, that regulates foraging and other types of gathering in the woods that would overlap with this. And 1854 and 1837 are the main two, only because they have been litigated in court. There's a series of other treaties out there, such as the 1866 with Boys Fort, 1855 with a whole series of Ojibwe tribes, and the 1863 with Red Lake. And those are just the Ojibwe when we're talking about recognition of access to foraging or harvesting, gathering. There's also the Dakota, who had their treaties abrogated, but what does that really mean to their access to their ancestral foods, traditional foods and medicines and whatnot? So just a little extra perspective when we're talking about what's being regulated, what's not being regulated, is regulating even the course that we're taking, but maybe a recognition more along guidelines for access to whatever it is may be that they're either seeking it for eating, which is very common, but some it's also for medicinal purposes. And does that start lying into, so if we're setting limits, or if we're setting areas, regions, how is that going to restrict the Dakota and the Ojibwe people generally, just because they may fall within a ceded territory?
Thank you, Bradley. Anyone else?
And let's just check in quickly with folks online in case anyone
Yes.
there has any thoughts, questions, or reactions.
Anyone online? Peter.
Yeah, this is Peter Marignaco, and I'd like to add a concern that I have that falls under equity for our Native American and Indigenous tribes is there's lots of people in Minnesota that are tribal members, but have indigenous cultural perspective. And how does it regulate them as well? I mean, they should have rights, even though the federal government doesn't recognize their membership as a official tribal member or have the rights of ceded territory. And the Dakota fall into that for the same reason. And I think that's important to be aware of. Lots of people here.
Thank you. So Nick has gone over kind of our state statutes and regulations right now. We're going to have further discussion on what we currently have in comparison to what other states have, and then kind of what our recommendations of where we focus on within the task force work. And so that will be, we'll still have more robust discussions on that. I just want to let you guys know this is not it. But from now until the next meeting as well, if you think that there's other information that would be helpful in our discussions in the future around this topic, please let Nick or myself know, and Stephanie as well. I've always said to the DNR, it's when I go online, I can't really tell which products I can forage and which ones I can't sometimes. It'd be cool if we had like just I know it's not as easy as I would like to see it, but like just a list. These are the things you can forage on this land, and on this land, these are the things you can forage. It's just really some kind of chart, and with pictures. I'm a picture person. So when you said this type of mushroom, give me a picture of what that mushroom looks like. So I'm just wondering if there's something like that already. And if there isn't, maybe that could be a recommendation. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is around what other states the regulations are.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members, the memorandum in this is not as interesting perhaps because it's really a long list of statutes and regulations across the country where possible. Those are all linked to government websites. But what I think is perhaps more interesting is up on your screen is a map of the US. And there are largely two camps across states, which is that you have a lot of the South and the West who prohibit foraging, and their laws are pretty clear cut about banning, and they use the same terms across states about eradicating, mutilating, taking plants or any natural object. And then you have, New England, the Great Lakes, and Pacific Northwest, who have fairly similar to Minnesota statutes or rules that permit foraging for personal use if it's edible products, so mushrooms, berries, nuts, seeds. So if Minnesota is interested in charting a new path, there's not really another state to follow. It's really these two groups which either permit foraging for personal use and require a permit for commercial use, or states that generally ban it across the board outside a permit. And based on my limited research, a lot of states outside probably large commercial permits are not doing much foraging or gathering of resources in their state parks or public lands. So this is a lot of links, and some of them have some nuance, like Connecticut only allows mushroom foraging, but not seeds or fruit. Maine has state parks and public lands, and those are different things that I've now learned about. So I'm happy to answer any questions either here or offline about the difference across the country.
Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Foraging for personal use allowed, Maine, Michigan, Missouri, Minnesota's there, right?
Oh, yes. Sorry, Representative. I thought because I put it on the other page, I did need to double it. But yes, Minnesota is in that same camp.
Yeah, I was looking through it and I go, I think we're this, and comparing. So when you were in your little bit of research that you did, are there other states that have state forests like we do? Like we have a lot of state forests. Do they have state forests or do they just have state parks? Or do they have the?
Yeah, Representative Scrubba, every state is kind of different in what they call things. So I think what we might call a state forest, Maine calls public lands. So a lot of northern Maine is
Right.
uninhabited. And so it's not a state park. In state parks, you can't forage, but they have broad swaths of wood where foraging is allowed and where people recreate, camp, I think similar to what we consider state forests in Minnesota. So every state has different, they'll have like reserve areas in state parks and their state park might be what we would call a state forest. So every state kind of does it a little different, but yes, most states have sort of different types of public land.
So within the state park, because I have to go back, I am thinking Bearhead State Park, it's like where I'm from. So if that, and then I have Burnside State Forest right next to it. So in our state, you can pick or you can forage the mushrooms on state forest land all day long. I believe so far that's good, but state parkland, some you can, some you can't. There's no commercialization.
No commercial ones.
No commercial. But you can still pick in a state park.
Correct.
Yeah, but we didn't for a while. Or
No,
no?
always have.
Okay. What was the ban?
It was some proposed restrictions.
Oh, okay. 'Cause that's how I got originally, I won't say roped into foraging. But I was lobbied very heavily by constituents saying, you got to do something, and I was like, if you don't know what you're doing, it's pretty hard to do, so but I got out and I watched and I listened, and the commercialization, I think, is the crux of the issue, kind of how much I see in some of the reading I looked through, a gallon, we're already going to look, and I have friends that pick morels on the North Shore, and some years they get 5 and some years they get 500, and so do you say you can only have a gallon, and it's like, okay, and I think this is healthy, having these discussions, especially with people that are in the real know, that do this, because I surely, like Senator Green, I don't want to be more burdensome to the populace. I mean, when they get out of control, when it gets absolutely where we can see that something is occurring, something's happening, yeah, then we need to. But to do something just in case it does, I'm not there yet. That's not the way I legislate. I want to make sure that you have the right to do this. And again, I only have 43,000 people for 14,000 square miles. And there's a lot of other people coming up there to use that land and to enjoy it. And I don't want to put any less regulations on them than I need to, because I want them to come up and have that feeling that we have every day that we do. So,
Thank you.
I guess the question that I was thinking of on the ones that say no, where you have, foraging is prohibited without permission or permit. Do a majority of them have permission and permit in each state? Or is it just across the board? No.
Madam Chair, members, it's generally, it looks like it's across the board. No, they put in in case certain ones will say a park supervisor could permit it. But based on my research, even though like that exists, it doesn't happen. So there's really the Minnesota version where it just sort of says personal use. And you see that kind of language mirrored across other states where they don't define the difference between what is personal use and what is commercial use, but you still need a permit for commercial use. And then states like Colorado, California, Texas, where it's fully banned without a permit, and it doesn't look like there's an easy permitting process.
Did that include berries too, or just mushrooms, you know?
It's all natural products.
Oops.
Thank
I
you,
elk
Roger.
hunt in Colorado, and every now and then there's a berry there.
I'll report you, Roger.
But I identified as a bear that day, so I'm okay.
Kelly?
Thank you, Senator Pa. I think it's important to recognize too that across the country, every state, how they're structured with their Department of Natural Resources, a Department of Conservation, a lot of times they're looking at public recreation in a much broader capacity than just foraging or collecting or harvesting. I think there's three different terms that are interchangeable and maybe not interchangeable in our conversation. The other thing is every state, how they're funded is very, very different. So the impacts of looking at recreational opportunities, which are above and beyond just foraging, harvesting, or collecting, we have obligations to provide a multitude of recreational opportunities for all visitors and all Minnesotans that aren't just looking at one specific opportunity when they come onto public lands. So I think it's really important that every state is different, they're structured different, they're funded differently, they have different rules and regulations. So it's not apples to apples, I think, in every state. And we look at this topic as one of many for public lands and how people recreate, and they have many opportunities. And I think from the department's side, we're responsible to make sure that everyone has access for a variety of recreational opportunities and that they don't compete with each other, they don't impact. And ultimately, we're also responsible to protect our natural and cultural resources on those sites. So we have to look at it from a much broader perspective than maybe what other states are doing, but really think about the opportunities we have here and the statutes that we have in place that have been put in place to drive those really good decisions that we have to protect our land. So I just want to make that known. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Alex?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. I think we're finding a lot of nuance here for everything. I think it was touched on the last meeting, but I'm just wondering if there's if you've done any research or have any knowledge of tree sapping as well. And if we're looking at, like limitations on personal use and collection, it's going to take 40 gallons of maple sap to boil that down then to get just a gallon. So if we're talking about, you can only take a gallon of blueberries or whatever it is of edible product to take home, then for sap, you're going to get like a thimbleful of syrup at the end of the day. So just wondering if that, but not just maple, I mean, birch, walnut, box elder, trees that are frequently tapped as well. And so just want to make sure that we're also considering that. And if we have kind of a blanket 1 gallon rule, that wouldn't necessarily work for tree sap in that particular example.
I know Nick is taking notes on additional research questions, including historical context for the current statutes and regulations, rules around tree sapping, and kind of a larger question of how quantities are determined, and if they're blanket quantities or how often quantities are specified too, because I know sometimes it just says personal versus commercial without necessarily defining. So I think Nick will be looking for kind of a sampling of what's out there. I'd encourage everyone to kind of poke around in the links that Nick shared for the states that do allow some foraging, not so much because we should copy them, because as Kelly noted, the language is different, or the agencies are different, the structures are different, but there may be something that kind of sparks an idea that is worth kind of following as a group to think about, is this something that could give some shape to what we think might work here? So that's kind of just as you digest today's discussion and, prepare for the next meeting when that comes along. Those are some of the things to kind of keep in mind. And I'm guessing one of the reasons that in the last meeting, it was one or more of you who asked for information about other states, because, there may be something there that kind of speaks to you that could help inform recommendations here. And this comes back to what you want to do as a task force, right? So there's the enabling legislation obviously sets out some things that you need to do, but really that is create recommendations for the legislature related to foraging that balances people's ability to forage with conservation needs, and ensure that you're doing that based on, the things that you're going to learn. There's still a lot in there that kind of you get to decide. And so if you, just from some of the things that I've heard today, if you want to just talk about kind of personal use of edible products and leave leave commercial to the side, that can be your choice. If you decide that you look at the existing statutes and regulations and realize that clarification on personal versus commercial would be helpful, those are the types of things that you should be thinking about in terms of what you'd like to accomplish as a task force. And the questions that we'll be asking you in those interviews and compiling and kind of coming back to give some shape to those thoughts, and then let you kind of take it from there. So I just wanted to have a facilitator moment there and give you all some food for thought, no pun intended.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I agree that maybe what we could do in the future session with all this conversation, great discussion, is review. We could put together, and maybe Nick and us can work on putting together with your recommendations and input too, is really a list of the things that we can filter through and say, what do we want to be part of our scope of work? And what do we not want to do? So, when we talk about sapping or the birch and tree cutting or commercial, what do we want to focus on as this task force? And what parts are we not going to be working on? And we can list some things and then from there, focus on some things that we want to work on. Peter.
Peter Martiniaco. I would like to request that we get somebody to present that's a foraging educator, because I know a number of the members here are not familiar with really the entire foraging experience. When people talk about limits, if they don't understand what foragers do and how they proceed and how they collect and harvest and preserve their products for personal use, I think that would be very informative to this task force to kind of understand, when people say, well, a gallon, well, what does that mean? And it means lots of different things depending and stuff like that. So I think that perspective of having a knowledgeable person explain what people do, what that foraging is, and there's more people that are more knowledgeable than I am. So,
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Is there anybody online that we haven't seen that would like to speak? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and move to the next item on our agenda. we'll go into the, I guess, the scope of the task force.
Yep, yes, let's come back to that, just briefly. We've just talked about some of this and we're doing really well on time, so, I think we'll have time to continue with this, but we'll probably want to come back to it. One more thing I want to, hear your thoughts on, but, especially think about what might need clarification. And again, research topics for Nick, topics where we might want to bring a speaker in, as Peter's suggesting. And so speaking of that, jumping ahead a little bit here on the agenda to upcoming topics, to then kind of bring it back to scope of the task force, these are the things that either are in statute or were mentioned in the last meeting. So let me just share my screen again. There we go. So that first bullet is from statute. So what is the impact of foraging on species resilience, ecosystem health, and other aspects of Minnesota's diverse biomes, and ensuring that traditional ecological knowledge is being considered, as well as more formal, less traditional, newer types of knowledge. There were questions last time about kind of understanding what information is available for members of the public, how readable it is in terms of plain language, if translations are available, questions about accessibility from a financial perspective in terms of what types of payments, like somebody had noticed that like only checks and money orders were permitted, which is not consistent with current practices of handling money for many people. Whether permits are standardized within the DNR system, kind of those. So I know that's one kind of area of information of interest. Other foraging related questions.
Stephanie,
yeah.
that in itself is like a legislative session.
Yeah.
To get the DN,
Yeah.
to try to get a
Yeah.
standardized system.
Right.
For,
Yeah,
I mean, we
absolutely.
tried to get the electronic license, like real simple. Every state does it, and then it's like, wow, this
Yeah.
took 5 years to get to this point,
Yeah.
but it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no.
And then, other foraging related questions that came up last time and today as well, around other cultures, practices, and use of plants, especially where foraging is neither permitted nor prohibited, but also where use of plants has changed. So maybe since previous foraging rules or statutes were established, there may be different plants or different parts of plants than what was regulated or considered before. And then someone had brought up the tragedy of the commons and what's included when talking about foraging. So I think a lot of that connects to some of the things that have come up here. And so just what else do you have in mind that you would like to learn more about as you think about the scope of the task force, your goals for what the task force might accomplish, and what you would like to learn more about as part of this process?
Thank you, Stephanie. One of the just basic things is, and I think Peter had, if we had a very knowledgeable forager, you could ask the questions, why do you do it? What do you do with it? How much is it? How long does it last? Do you freeze it? You can it? Do you, and like, where I'm from, the Iron Range, we have different cultures that do different things with the same fruits. You have Slovenians that do this, Finns that do this, and everyone's culture does something different with it. just because the one person that might say this is what we do with it isn't what it is, but at the same time, it would be nice to know some, just cursory, you know, like some of those questions, just what do you do with it? And how is the process now? Does it encourage young people to do this? Does it encourage other folks that are coming here to do it? And maybe, I like Peter's idea of finding someone that doesn't have a quote, you know, that wants to educate.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, thank you, Roger.
Yeah.
David?
Madam Chair, leading up to the creation of the task force by the legislature, there were several of us who were working with DNR about as rumors circulated regarding the formation of doing rulemaking. And part of what I would like to have at some point, and by the way, and part of some of those rumors were that there were complaints, again, these are all rumor, we had nothing substantiated, rumors that some of the park rangers were complaining that there was like trampling going on or people coming in and doing a variety of destructive things. And what I'd like to get is some kind of presentation from the DNR where they kind of sort of lay out what their concerns are, lay out sort of the complaints that they supposedly have that are coming in from park rangers and so forth, so that we can get some kind of sense of what their thinking is on this matter also. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think we can do that.
They're here.
Kelly?
Senator Pot, Kelly Bruns, Minnesota DNR. I think our opportunity, if we are in the field together at Fort Snelling State Park, we have an interpretive naturalist there, Kowtow, who's been there for 25 or 30 years. Cow will be able to provide some really great background and talk about the education that at a state park level that we share with the public about the species. What happens with that species is all of the recreational opportunities we're challenged with finding. Some people may want to come and photograph them. Some people may want to study them for climate change. Some people may want to forage. So having that opportunity at the park level where we could potentially support what is the focus of that day, we would have some really great opportunities to have DNR staff that work just in a state park setting, talk about what that looks like on a day-to-day basis and over many years with our naturalist who's been there for quite a period of time. So just a suggestion as we plan for that field day, that could be a really nice opportunity for the group.
Thank you, Kelly. That would be great. Anyone else that I might have missed? Okay, Kristen, and then Bradley, and then anyone else?
Kristen Poppleton. I just wanted to add to the foraging education, and I come to this with as by no means an expert in this, but I did have an opportunity to spend some time with the Bad River tribe a few years back, understanding more traditional ecological knowledge, but the value that it's something that I think white folks us don't necessarily understand of like what it means to be a blueberry, for example, in the name of the blueberry itself, what is in that. It's not just the name of blueberry. It could tell you when that blueberry is, grows, when it's important. It helps us. It's a learning piece that I think is also really important to be added. And as I've been thinking about, the outcomes of what we might do here and listening to, I believe it was Representative Scrabble that said, well, let's wait until there is a problem and then we could do regulations. And I don't know if this exists in the world, and this is me living in an ideal world, but is there examples of more, and I hate to use the word trigger, but like a trigger law that goes into place based on monitoring of the really important species that we have? So we might have keystone species that we know have real cultural value and ecological value. And if we're seeing a decrease, then that goes in, we're not going to be collecting this foraging for this, or climate change impacts, which we know are just having a huge impact on a lot of our. So that's something like, is there a framework that this task force could develop that looks at that and says, well, when do we need to regulate this? If we do, what is that? What triggers that? So those are just two things mulling around in my head. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Bradley?
I mean, yeah, so I was gonna talk about very similar. But looking back in history there, it was like TEK type of knowledge that really established what we now celebrate every November with a Thanksgiving feast. And, it was that type of knowledge that was there and available and still available here today that can help with identifying species out there, whether it be in abundance or low in abundance. Something that I think that we should include, we're here for a short time together, coming together as a task force, but what more long-term initiatives, because these species out there, you talk about them in decades, really with their own migrations, their own patterns, and throughout their own generations. So um, just thinking about what our purpose is here today, solving what we're hearing today, trying to get guidance out there with what we're hearing today, but also what we may be hearing in the future. Uh, I'm very fortunate enough to be able to speak with quite a bit of youth and their interest in the environment, sustainability, and everything that goes along with ecological relativeness to the environment is a lot more than what I had in ninth grade and 10th grade. So we're already raising a lot more engaged individuals, and what access would they have in the future with environmental changes or more population out there, a better understanding of it. So maybe what I would hope to see is a longer strategy, um, coming together and talking about it now today, but how are we going to be able to set up this next generation of leadership to be able to look back and say that, what we did here today helped them in the future understand foraging better, understand environmental concerns better, and the species themselves.
Thank you, Bradley. And we have Gary online. Go ahead, Gary.
Yes, just to follow up on David Schultz and Kelly's Burns talk on park rangers' concerns and so forth. I wonder if a quick survey could be done for state parks and maybe WMAs, AMAs. Obviously, there's different managers for those locations and different populations of our residents visiting or non-residents visiting those areas. And maybe just asking a quick question, a couple, three questions maybe. Do they see damage to foraging and of foraging in those areas? What species are affected? And then what they would do or what they think should be the corrective mode of action to conservation, keep those conservation type plants in order and in the landscape and so forth. Just their recommendations, but it varies by region. Obviously, Blue Mountain State Park versus Itasca State Park or Whitewater State Park certainly have different foraging plants that are out there and native to those environments. So I think back to that topic about regions of the state is certainly different in some of these foraging edibles. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Anyone else? David.
David Schultz, I like that idea. The question is, how quickly could we do something like that? That's actually a really interesting idea about doing a quick survey. And so this is kind of an administrative sort of question here. How quickly could we turn that kind of information around?
Something we could look into.
Yeah, if we can get a list of, people and email addresses, then I don't think it would be very difficult for us to pretty quickly put something together, for talking, 3 or 4 questions. The big thing is if we can come up with questions that are multiple choice, it's much quicker to then, it's not just getting the information, it's turning it back around into something that's digestible. Yeah. So, we'll give that some thought. We'll maybe reach out to you with, for input on, kind of questions, and if there are, again, kind of multiple choice response options that help. And then if there's like one that's open-ended that, what are you most concerned about, and or what do you think are good solutions? And then that can kind of just be like compiled and, okay, there's 3 pages here now for you to read through, but we've got the more readily digestible multiple choice. Probably more detail than you really wanted, but, you know, but what, you know, okay, we'll be thinking about, yeah, so not just, can we design a survey and get it out, but can we design something that can be quickly converted into something digestible for all of you? So we'll take a look at that for sure.
Yeah, we
Okay,
could take a look
thank
at
you
that
very
and
much.
talk with the DNR too and see if there's something that could be done. Anyone else? Okay, well, we've got that, so the survey that Gary talked about is actually something that kind of leads me to something I want to try. I don't know, did you have anything else, Stephanie, before I go to the Fistify? Okay, we can always come back to discussions though. But it kind of leads me to something I wanted to try and kind of bounce off with this group to see if you may be interested in trying this for this task force and the work that we do together moving forward. Stephanie actually brought this method to my attention and Roger's attention as maybe a good tool for us, and it's called the Fist to Five. Has anyone heard that? Raise your hand if you have heard the Fist to Five. Okay. So I think I might have used it a few times, not facilitating it in any kind of a group, but just used it here and there as I do my work. And I think it is really great. Let me go over what it is, and then we can kind of decide as a group whether or not that's something we want to do.
Have it on the screen as well.
Oh,
so
thank
people can
you.
See the visual.
So how it works is that fist to five, fist is 0 fingers, which usually means strong disagreement or opposition. 1 to 4 fingers, varying levels of support. 5 fingers is full agreement of or support, a strong support. So this way, all of us as members can indicate where we are on something, whether it's a 0 or a 5 or somewhere in between. And I really think this is great because it's a great way for us to work collaboratively in this group on things that we want to move forward on. Not necessarily replacing voting by any means on things that we have to take votes on, but for an example, like the survey that Gary brought up, which, is a good idea. But then that's something where we could say, hey, Fist to Five, how many of us think that we want to move forward with maybe trying to do a survey, gathering that information? That's a good way for us to gauge whether or not we should move forward on that idea or we should not. And so that's because we'll have lots of ideas in this group. And we'll want to know if it's something that we move forward with, where staff will work on it to get that information to us, or if that's something that we discuss here, but we're not really pursuing. So I think that that's why this could be a method that we use. We could try it out, and then if we don't think it's working, we could try something else. But it's really a great way for us to check agreement for proposals and ideas. We can also identify concerns early. So if we're talking about something and there's a number of us that are 0 on it, where we're very strongly against it or in disagreement, then we can at least talk about that more in detail and have more conversations about it. What I would like to see though, is that if you are a 0 or a 1, and we're talking about an important issue in which a majority of us would like to move forward, we don't want to just say because there's only 1 or 2 members of us that are a 0 or 1 that we're just going to do it, despite someone feeling very strongly against it. Is that we ask the ones that are a 0 and 1 to kind of talk about what the issue is. Like, what is their concern and their issue? And then we can kind of talk more in depth about how do we address that. So it's a good way to gauge where people are and a good way to work together more collaboratively as a group. Make sure that we hear people and their concerns. So I guess the thing is, I'd love to propose it to all of you if this is something we could potentially use for this group moving forward. And also ask that any of you who've had experiences with the Fist to Five, if you could share kind of if you like it, don't like it, think it'd be good for this group or not. Don't be shy, those who have used it. Any experiences?
I found that it's surprisingly effective. Like, it doesn't seem like it would be, and it actually is.
Okay.
A lot of times it's, this is Stephanie, a lot of times it's used as the precursor to the vote. And as facilitators, we find that it's it can be very effective because it creates kind of a safe space to share concerns in a productive way, where it's not just I'm going to say no and no one's going to listen to why. And so I'm just going to sit here and be angry. It's like, no, actually, I'm being asked to explain my concerns and I'm going to be heard. And it's pretty amazing as a facilitator. I mean, you'll hear people say, oh my gosh, I was a 5. I hadn't even thought about that. Let's talk, like, can we, what's the workaround for, like, how do we address that? So it's not just you use that to get the people who have concerns to agree. You also get the people who are in agreement to share concerns and often, find solutions that nobody would have envisioned initially. And I think that's why it seems like it wouldn't work, but then it does.
Mhm. Go ahead, Roger.
We spoke a little bit about this and I'm new to it and I'm like, if it brings more discussion, I'm all for it. I mean, the more we get discussion and so I'm willing to give it a try. And one of my visions now that we're sitting here, it would be like, does everybody want to have a speaker come next week about this? Instead of having a formal vote on it, 1, 2, or 3, we're 5, where are you on it? And if and we don't have to spend, okay, representative, great, each one, just throw it out there. If you don't want to do anything, you don't have to, but the idea is then we can make more of an informed decision on leadership, what direction, who is going to be here. That's how I'm seeing this, and like, I think like Stephanie said, it's a precursor to the vote, trying to get all the stuff out. So we're not at the vote going, what do we, thought we talked about this sort of.
Correct. And because we are going to have so many ideas and so many things we want to do, and because of our time and the limitations that we do have in this work, we want to make sure that we act on the things that we're all, 3s or above on, right? And the majority of us are. If we're like, yes, but I'm really yes with a 3, and all of us are 2s and 3s, we're still a yes, but if it's all 2s and 3s, maybe that one isn't a priority. But if we're all 4s and 5s, then maybe that's something we move on. So it kind of gives us a temperature of what do we focus our work on? What do we do? And so, so maybe we use this opportunity to use a fist of 5 as as a first trial here on whether or not we should try the fist to 5 method going forward. So if I can just get everyone to give me your either fist or your up to 5 on whether or not we do this, we try this for the task force, okay? So. Okay, do I see? I wish I could do the 4 like you, Bradley, but no. Okay, so it looks like we're pretty good. And I'm looking online too, so the ones online, show us your fist to 5. All right, thank you.
Yeah, so I saw a 3, 4, and a 5 on screen. If today's not a bad arthritis day for me, so I can do all the things, like if you need to do 2 hands to get to the right number, that's okay. It still counts.
And shall we, before we move forward on the survey, shall we just do a fist to 5 on the on maybe the state survey and see if that's something that we want to even explore? And we could, and not saying that we are going to do it, but just explore it with our conversation with DNR to see if that's able to be done. So do we want that information? Do we not? It's going to take some work. So if not all of us are that interested, I don't want to go through the work of doing it. But if we think that that's valuable to our work, we should definitely do it. Luke.
Luke Skinner, 3 Rivers Park. Sorry for coming in late, but I heard most of that. On state lands managed by the DNR, can't we just request that the DNR pool and we give them the information that we want, let them pull it all together and come back and provide a presentation with some of this information?
Yep. Very possible. Thank you, Luke. I guess, how do
That's
we want to
actually-
proceed?
You know, I think that's actually a really good point. I think if we ask the DNR to compile and provide what they know about where damage is seen, what kind of damage it is, the information that they already have available, if we ask for that from them and then see what questions remain after that, then maybe we revisit the question of a survey, because it may be that that really provides the insight that's needed. Or it may open up different questions that we really do need to ask, you know, the folks that are responsible for different state parks, and then we'll use their time more effectively for things that we can't
Yeah.
find elsewhere.
I think that's a good suggestion. Let's further discussion, then we'll talk more. David, Dale, and then Greg.
Okay, David Schultz, since this was my suggestion, I think, or variation, I think it's a good idea to start with what they already know. And then from there, we can build from there.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dale Gentry. You know, I was going to put up a 5 because I think I would champion this. I would love to have some data on the perspectives of the land managers. And I think what they already know is going to be like, we know that some people have concerns, but we don't know how many of them have concerns and what their concerns are. So I would really like to see a more formal poll of some sort conducted.
Dale. Greg.
You know, it brings up a question here. This is a sustainable foraging task force, and I'm all about trying to figure out what impacts foraging has on public lands. I'm also extremely interested in what the foraging community has to say, and I know there's some representatives from foraging communities here, but if we're seeking opinions, I think we need to hear from that community also, and that might be something relative to what Peter said about having a forager come in. However, can I ask this question? How many different foraging groups are there in, types of foraging groups are there in Minnesota?
No.
Can somebody answer that question?
Anyone who can, go ahead. Peter.
This is Peter Martignaco. I can give some, a little bit of overview of that, just because I've been trying to reach out to all of them in regard to this topic. And, you know, those groups are typically revolve around either the kinds of things that they forage for, whether it be berry pickers or mushroom hunters or plant foragers, okay? And the second grouping comes into cultural grouping. So various, you know, whether it be our indigenous citizens, whether it be our, you know, immigrants, whether recent or traditional, like people on the Iron Range that have been here 100 years, they're broken up into cultural groups often. And, but I think one can, if one is generally talking about berries, mushrooms, nuts, and plants, that covers most of the stuff for foraging for personal use. And that would typically include medicinal products as well. I think most people in the foraging community look at things that they forage from a medicinal perspective at times. I know in the mushroom community, there's some mushrooms that are collected specifically for, I mean, it's not something you enjoy eating. You pick it for its medicinal benefits.
Yeah.
And there's plants that fall into both those categories as well. So.
Thank you, Peter. David and then Gary.
Madam Chair, I think Greg's question is kind of interesting. Were you asking, are there formal groups or what were you referring to?
Yes, David, I would say formal groups. I know you represent a formal group.
Right.
And I know there's commercial harvesters. I think it would be interesting to hear from that group also. And Peter, you represent a group that forages. My basic question was, how many do we know about?
Yeah.
That we could ask some pretty simple questions about, what do you want to see preserved in foraging? What do you see as issues in foraging? I mean, their opinions are as important as the professionals, because those are the people that are going to be actually out there doing their thing and maybe doing bad things at the same time. So that's my thought.
Yeah, okay. Madam Chair, the reason why I was asking this question also, it's totally anecdotal. I'll mention it here, but on Facebook, I'm a member of like 2 or 3 different kind of like foraging group, like associations like that. And pardon me? Okay. At least I was going to say, and most of those people, I would say, I wouldn't really call them formal groups. It's a bunch of, I don't know, random individuals, people who are just kind of interested, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I was asking the question here, because I have a gut intuition of which I can't prove here, that I think most of what we're talking about here is lots of individuals, or maybe, I don't even want to use the word lots. It's individuals going out and foraging. I'm not sure we've got really too many formal groups going out as formal groups, as far as I know. I know in the Mycological Society, we do a few forays per year, maybe something like that. And I was going to say, we limit it to what, maybe like 30 or something like that. So we're looking at, those kind of numbers in terms of what it is. I can't speak to, other organizations in terms of whether or not they're actually doing formal forays, formal harvesting, how many people. Again, my suspicion is, without proving it, it's mostly, it's like what I did over the weekend. I went out to William O'Brien State Park and walked around and had a basket just in case I got lucky.
Thank you, David. Greg, and then Gary, and then Kelly. Yep.
Greg Qualley. To answer that question, David, I would state that, my position here on backcountry hunters and anglers is access to public lands, access to those resources on those public lands. So our organization would definitely have a position on restricting, some of those types of activities, depending on whether they're harming the environment or not. So I guess that's kind of where I was going with that. I think there's some importance there to find out from the people that are doing it, what do they want to see? And some of us here, maybe all of us, are representing those people by sitting on this task force. So that's.
Thank you, Greg. Gary, and then Kelly.
Madam Chair, Gary Wyatt. Yes, we're looking at almost 2 surveys maybe. I like Greg's idea, maybe surveying or at least contacting the groups that are foraging in the state of Minnesota. I think that's a great idea. But back to the idea of maybe surveying the DNR staff. Certainly, we have managers managing state parks and MAAs and WMAs. We've got emails that are capable to email them quickly. I think a 2-week type survey would be very good, and they could get their staff together and say, okay, here's the question from this task force. Is there a concern of foraging in our state park? Period. Yeah, if there is, yes or no. If there is, what species are involved, and what conservation practices should be done to correct that situation in order to alleviate instinct becoming this plant or organism to be extinct in that park. Just a simple question. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Kelly.
Thank you, Senator Pot, Kelly Bruns, Minnesota DNR. We're very fortunate in our department to have staff that have researched and have knowledge, and we have very robust databases on what's on the landscape on all of the different administered lands we have within the department. The benefit of that is that we have a lot of data and we have a lot of information on how species are impacted natural and cultural resources are impacted. But what we find is that, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of recreational activities. So to say that a cultural site or a resource or one specific plant is impacted potentially just by foraging would be very challenging, because we have school groups, we have flood events, we have natural disasters, we have a host of activities that happen across the landscape on all department public lands. And any species or any resource at any time is going to have an impact. And that changes day by day. So while we have a really good understanding of what we protect and we provide for opportunities on any given day, those things can change for any reason. So if we're looking to try to say that a resource is impacted just from foraging, that's going to be difficult to try to determine because of the scope of recreational activities we see on all of the different administered lands that the department manages. So we have a wealth of knowledge and resource specialists that monitor all of our resources every day, but they're impacted differently in different places in the state by different activities all the time. So I think we need to be mindful of the breadth of impacts that are out there on our resources, natural and cultural.
Thank you, Kelly. Was there someone else that I might have missed that wanted to speak? Okay, so let's see here. I've heard a lot of the discussion here, and I'm thinking two things. One is with the specific to the DNR and possible survey. Do we want to then just invite the DNR to come and do a presentation of the information they already have with specifics about the things we want them to talk about? Like, we could give them recommendations that these are the questions we'd like you to address, or these are specifically what we want to hear in this presentation, and start with that first. And then if we feel that we need more information, we could always ask for that and follow up. So that's one suggestion. And then the second one is, Greg, you brought up hearing from formal groups, and maybe even some informal groups that that are out there foraging. I think it's a great idea to invite them, but also invite them with specific questions that they can think about in sharing for us that we find beneficial. Like, these are the things we would like you to talk about when you come to meet, present or meet with us. And then anything else you'd like to share on this topic. And maybe have that at one of the meetings, specifically just for that, because I can tell that probably could take a whole meeting, is inviting these separate groups to present and then giving us time to really conversate with them in in-depth discussion and ask questions back and forth with some of these groups, and have that robust discussion. So those are kind of two ideas right now. Any discussion on that or addition to that? Could we use the FISTA 5 to kind of gauge where if we want to pursue these or not? So regarding, well, let's do the DNR first. Would people be okay with us asking the DNR to do a presentation with us giving them a kind of direction about what we want, the questions we have, what information we would like to hear, and then start with that first? And that could be in the future third or fourth meeting, depending on when they can pull that information together. FISTA 5, 0, no, 5, yes. And I'm going to look online as well. Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and schedule that and work on that. The other one is hearing from formal and maybe some informal groups as well. We can get suggestions from the members here about who we can invite. I would say just so that we have enough time and the people who do come and present feel like they add a value to the group, maybe we limit it to 4 to 5 people, and it doesn't have to be specifically formal groups. And I almost want to say, we can welcome them and you guys can make suggestions about who, But I also don't want to, some of you who already belong to that group or in representation of that group, I'm not saying you would represent their entire voice, but I'm wondering, I'd love to hear from a variety of people. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe more than 4 or 5. Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Just on that, if it looks like we're going to get the DNR to present, we should get maybe the DNR to present with the information that they have. The one thing that worries me about the groups is that they don't have the state, unless I'm wrong, they probably don't have a statewide view. They have, individual pockets where they go and forage, and that could be different. And they really don't have the knowledge it would take to, from one experience or two experiences, to give us that kind of information that we need. But as far as the DNR goes, we're just have them present. The other thing, you talked about the survey from the DNR. I've never seen them do a survey where they didn't want more money, so I don't know if they're going to want to do that. But but let's start with the presentation first.
Thank you, Steve.
There had also been a suggestion of a presentation by a foraging educator, so that might be a starting place to get that wider view versus like the individual smaller groups who might have more localized views as another starting point. And then we also do have a couple folks online.
So I think, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong in this thinking, but I think what we're inviting these formal, informal groups is really to talk about their perspective as foragers, not necessarily state guidelines or laws or some of the questions that we may have, but we could tailor the questions to things we want to hear from these foragers and foraging groups, and think about some questions that we have, like kind of similar to what we had talked about before, which is, what is important to you? Like when you go out and forage, we may think a gallon size is doable. It really isn't. And we can tailor those questions and say, these are the things we'd like to hear from you. And then also, what else would you like us to know? And then we can have more robust discussions. And maybe during that time, we could think about the educator coming in first and then having the group kind of think about what we could do that's separate from okay, so I have a few people, so I'm just gonna go online because Gary, Luke, and then I will go to Peter, Alex, and anybody else. Gary.
Madam Chair, Gary Wyatt. Comment to Kelly, just to kind of reinforce the fact, if your data from the DNR is 10 or 20 years old, I urge you to send out a survey to get the current data, because obviously we've had a lot of changes in the last 10 or 20 years regarding foraging around state parks or state lands and even private lands in the state of Minnesota and the Midwest. Certainly COVID is a part of that, going out and finding food and so forth. But yeah, hopefully you have current data, and if you don't, I'd urge you to send out a survey to those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Luke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Luke Skinner, Three Rivers. I'm interested, I apologize, missing for the first half of the meeting, but I mean, one of the big voices is our indigenous communities. And I know we have 2 representatives potentially coming on, one from Dakota, one from Ojibwe. I'm not sure if that's happened yet or not, but to me, that's one of the key voices I want to hear from, as well as the mycologists and other foraging groups. But and that is a statewide perspective when we get something like this. Maybe I missed it, or I want to make sure that voice is heard when we come to hear about values and interests. And I went on a plant knowledge walk with somebody from the Dakota last week, and some of the plants that they were talking about were so common and ubiquitous that it's not the same issue that we might see with mushrooms or more rare or sensitive species.
Thank you, Luke. I absolutely agree with you. We are working on the 2 members from MICA that will be coming. They have not, to my knowledge, appointed the 2 task force members. But I have a request to the executive director, Shannon, to have that conversation and kind of discuss whether or not they will be appointing 2 people, and what can we do in building that relationship to make sure that that we have that perspective here on this task force. Is really important. And we're very happy that Bradley is here with us, because that adds that perspective. Okay, so Peter and then Alex.
Yes, this is Peter Martignaco. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the reason that I brought up possibility of bringing in some foraging educator because the people that I have in mind have extensive and experience not only necessarily here in Minnesota, but beyond even that across the country in understanding the issues, the ecology, and what foraging can look like in different places and different parts. And they also work with other cultural communities, and including a couple of the people that I know spend a lot of time working, being part of indigenous foraging and stuff like that as well. So I think they can provide good perspective. I'm not saying that there aren't individual groups that have, that may have their own little take, and those should be considered as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Alex?
Luke addressed my concern, so thanks.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so could we do the fist to five for inviting an educator and also formal or informal groups to come and present, and then also share their perspective on foraging, if that's something we want to do in the future. So 0 or 5 or somewhere in between, okay? So, okay, online. Okay, so it looks like we do have a good consensus for that. So we'll work on, staff and I will work on doing that. I think what might follow that is an email to all of you about the questions you would like addressed, whether it's DNR or the groups. What questions do you have? And then we'll combine all of that information from you, and then we'll put out another survey that says this is the list, and try and get your feedback again about the priorities, because I'm sure we'll come up with like 50 questions and then condense it to maybe 6 or 7 core things we want them to focus on. And then from there, we can have robust discussions with them. So, okay. Well, I'm starting to like this fist to five thing. I don't know the rest of you, but Bradley, I'm sorry if I missed you.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there are those types of educators in the Ojibwe and Dakota communities. When we talk about hearing voices of organized groups and other informal groups, usually they would get left out because they're not groups, they're individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear.
Yes.
Some of those educators, because I got a really valuable perspective.
Yeah. Thank you, Bradley. If we can talk further, yeah, and get maybe some of the networks that you may have, that you may know. Thank you. Alex?
Yes. Just on that, I know Red Lake Nation has their college just over in Minneapolis, and I know I've toured it and seen their curriculum, and then know that they have experts in this as well. So that could be a very close organization that could be tapped, and they're likely to be present, not having to drive down from Red Lake, for example.
Okay.
I believe up on TP just down the road has someone who focuses specifically on plant species now too, correct? Right, like environmental. Who was it? Just like literally. Right there. On the road.
Thank you, Kristen.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question? So when we started the survey discussion, I think I was thinking something different. Maybe others in the room were too, would, in terms of people, I thought I heard we were talking about possibly surveying folks that just go to state parks and if they are foraging in them and what they do there. And if that was, okay.
No.
Well, that would be interesting too. I don't know if we have that data or if that survey has that been done by the DNR already, or.
That's a good question. Kelly or Matt, do you know if the DNR have done surveys for foraging related surveys?
Kelly Bruntz, Minnesota DNR, we do a lot of surveys. And, you know, the reality is that it's most of it, when you get to interpreting the survey, not all people are comfortable telling you exactly what they're doing and where and why. And it becomes non-public data too at some levels of how we report back on it. Most of our surveys are tied to recreational opportunities, but I don't believe we've done anything specific with people who are out foraging.
Mhm. And I have to agree with Kelly that I think this is just my own experience in hearing from many people that I know that forage is. Not everyone wants to tell you what they're doing because they don't want the state to put more regulations on, and for very good reasons. And so how do we, when we talk about foraging, how do we make it a conversation which we can really address people's needs and access, but really hear from them without this fear that their access or their ability to forage is somehow going to be affected. I'll just share, since we have a few more minutes, I guess going to share really quick a story about why I got interested in this work. So I had been foraging for a long time. I would say half of my practice was probably practice that I was doing wrong. But there was a huge Hmong community and Asian community that foraged Solomon seal specifically. And for those of you who know what Solomon seal can do health-wise, it was mainly for medicinal use. It helps with inflammation, which inflammation is kind of the core to many other types of illnesses. And so they have been foraging Solomon seal in I would say hazardous, unsafe ways, which is on the side of the roads, on sometimes on farmland that can be considered private property, in state parks, in state forests. And for a long time, my concern had always been they were foraging on literally the side of the roads, which they would be parking on, and it was a safety issue. And plus, it was all kinds of chemicals that were put on the road that now goes into the plant, and they're picking it. And so my concern was more that I started a conversation with the DNR about this specific thing, and I said, how can we make it safer for people to forage Solomon seal? And when I start this conversation with you, I already know that the group that does my community and this large group that does Solomon seal foraging is going to be very nervous and maybe angry at me for bringing this up because now there's going to be probably restrictions to that. But the reality is that there is a safety issue, and we should make it safer. Like we should make it where they have the opportunity to forage, but it's safer to forage. So if people love it this much, how can we make this more robust somewhere in our state lands where they can forage safely? And maybe that means that we purposely plan plantings in our state lands so they can forage there instead of on the side of the road. Well, I was kind of disappointed that through my conversation and saying there's a fear that we're going to take away their ability to forage, that actually through that conversation, Solomon seal that had no reference to it before as to whether it was permitted or not, or that it was regulated, then was added to the state forest as allowable, but now there's a fee to it. So then I'm just telling you that the people are so pissed at me. They're like, you shouldn't have said a single thing. We told you not to say anything. The minute you try to make it better for us, it got worse. And I was like, really, I mean, from a good place. We really have to make foraging more accessible. And if that means that we have to invest, just like we do with fishing and hunting, we have to invest in our public lands to make it more robust for people to be able to forage safely. I'd rather that, because there's families in my community who forage with children, and they're parked on the side of the road because they want Solomon seal. And there's got to be better ways. So, Greg.
Well, Susan, it's interesting you mentioned that because when it comes down to wild rice, there is a specific fund set up in the DNR that all the license money for the sale of wild rice licenses goes back into an account that can only be used to manage wild rice. So there's, there's an idea that's been around for a long time and it seems to be working. It's not a lot of money, but it's something that, that's given back to the resource from foraging.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Dale.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson Dale Gentry. I really appreciate you sharing that story. It brought up something I've been jotting notes on, and I didn't quite know how to articulate it, but it gets to the scope of the task force, which is, are we solving a problem, which is, there's inadequate clarity or policy around this, or are we doing a comprehensive review of everything foraging, which to me is a different thing. Like, are there components of what might come up that that everybody's kind of happy with, right? And so I guess I'm curious, for example, like syrup tapping, right? Is that something that people are really upset about the way it's managed, or is that something that is pretty adequately regulated and maybe shouldn't be part of our task force, and we're going to just irritate people by sort of fixing problems that aren't broken? Sorry, I think I just butchered that turn of phrase. So I think, so that's, sorry, I'm long way of saying, is this task force exist to solve problems, or is it to do more of that comprehensive review of everything that's related to foraging in Minnesota and deciding if the policy is adequate or not?
And I want to say from my perspective of someone who chief authored the bill is really saying, can we take a look at it comprehensively and make recommendations about what for the state of Minnesota, what we envision as for access, right? Access, and then also conservation as well, with that lens as well, so that we're not leaving it to, I would say, just the department through rulemaking or legislators who may not have that knowledge and that time to review what we're doing right now is gather information, review, have robust discussions. Because I can tell you just from my perspective as a legislator, we're not going to have that time as legislators to do that. So that's why it's so important that we do that work here, bring that recommendation so that the legislators can make educated choices in policy based on our recommendations. Did I miss someone else that wanted to speak? Okay, well, we are at time. Thank you, everyone, for this great meeting, and I call this meeting adjourned. Go ahead.
Quick question. Say, Nick, I sent you some of the resources and I see you shared some of them. Can the members of the task force get access to any of the others that may be a little too much to print out?
Yeah, I'll address everybody. If you send us stuff, we have posted a bunch of stuff online that not everything we printed, because some of the stuff you sent was kind of long, but it is all on the website for the task force. So if there's other resources members would like to share, I can email it out and I can post it to the website. And I'll be hitting up a couple of you after this meeting for more information for future meetings.
And if you'll see that you have your reimbursement forms in your packet too. Feel free, if you want to turn that in, give it to Nick. If you don't have time today, just know you can email that in as well, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick.